Told you I thought divergences would develop on the awesome oscillator and the MACD. I still think that. Told you I thought a triangle was developing. We've seen momentum turn back to bullish. That's now happened. Drag out longer than the previous guideline? Sure. Guess is we're going to get something similar to that. Wouldn't be surprised to see the winning streak break next week. Could be tensions in the Middle East. Could be earnings. Uncertainty surrounding the election. Could be a lot of different things. Combination of things. I think you're going to complete these divergences. I think they're going to finish. Once we see that gap fill on NASDAQ, I think S&P will get a peak at a top out. S&P daily here. The negative divergence is developing in the weekly time frame on the awesome oscillator, along with the other indicators I've been showing you. S&P weekly. Again, I told you I thought momentum would turn back to bullish. I told you that at the last minor low. And again, we went sideways. We're forming a possible divergence here on the MACD and the awesome oscillator. Drags out. The MACD moves higher. Awesome oscillator moves higher. Can form a divergence after that. My guess is it's under construction right now, and I think you'll end up breaking the winning streak next week in all likelihood. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel today. If you follow the link below, it'll take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want. You can take a moment to do that. I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration for that. We had a divergence here in the 4-hour time frame and on the 60-minute charts again that gave us this pullback here. Told you again, I thought we were forming a triangle. It is, but again, we're forming a larger divergence here that may again still be under construction here on the RSI. Again, it may go a little bit higher and then complete this divergence and complete that rising wedge I've been talking about on the daily chart. You'll see it if you watch this video all the way through. Told you in the daily time frame again, I think this divergence is developing with momentum. I told you we had a gray shaded area, a momentum line turning back to bullish, a bullish reversal of conditions that I talked about. Again, momentum is positive. So again, I think we're going to fill the gap, and then I think we're going to turn back down and complete these divergences with momentum. Here it is on the NASDAQ daily chart. These signals just gave us a pullback, as I talked about. We broke out of a bull flag and back tested on the 60-minute chart. Same thing here on the S&P 500 daily chart. Again, I think this divergence is carving out. I think that will complete Friday or on into early next week. I think we'll see it complete, and I think it will produce likelihood of peak and a reversal and allow those weekly charts to begin to have their divergences play out. Again, the shaded area told us a squeeze move is coming. It's upward. Line turned back to bullish. Now I'm watching for the divergence to complete, and I think that could be tomorrow or on into next week. Now, the market sold off today with the CPI data. It was a miss. More about that shortly. But tomorrow morning, we're going to get banks and financials. We're going to get JP Morgan. Okay, we're going to get JP Morgan. We're going to get Wells Fargo. We're going to get BlackRock and others. Next week, we'll get Netflix on Thursday after the bell, I believe. The following week after that, we're going to start getting Magnificent Seven stocks. As we start moving towards the end of the month, we're going to start getting the S&P earnings. We're going to be getting the Magnificent Seven stocks. It'll be interesting to watch guidance going forward. People say, well, the market possibly moved down because of earnings. Eventually, earnings will be downgraded. They're going to ratchet the earnings down. Earnings will not spare the market from what is getting ready to happen. JP Morgan and making financial stocks tomorrow, and then we go into next week. But just pay attention to that. We'll be watching to see if we can still fill that gap on the NASDAQ. The S&P sold off today surrounding the CPI data. Just went back to the 200-period moving average and bounced off of it pretty much. I'll show you what happened on the 5-minute chart in just a moment. But the CPI data, the data today and tomorrow, the CPI today, the producer price index, wholesale inflation tomorrow, month over month came in hotter than expected. Still relatively on the tame side on a month-over-month basis. The month-over-month core, 0.3%, opposed to 0.2%. So both the numbers came in 0.1% higher than the estimate. The year-over-year, the headline number, the year-over-year came in also hotter than expected. It was expected to come in at 2.3, but it came in at 2.4. Came in hotter than expected. Still below the 2.5, and even though it missed On the estimate, it's still at the, and this is the headline number, it's still at the lowest reading since over here in 2021. The headline number for the CPI, which again was lower than the previous reading there at 2.5%. We got the core number. And let me just go back here. Well, the numbers came in hotter than expected. All of them came in hotter than expected. Still have the CPI dropping to a new fresh low on a year-over-year basis, the lowest level since 2021. Core came in at 3.3, higher than the 3.2 expected, and the 3.3 is higher, though, than the 3.2 previously last month on a year-over-year basis. Inflation numbers ticking back up. There's now concerns of stagflation. Hearing that for a while. Eventually, we're going to get a recession. Deflationary forces will take. I want to continue to point this out. It's something I've noticed that sometimes when you get the inflation data and you get them back to back, usually here, the producer price index, we'll get that tomorrow before the market opens. Sometimes, and maybe it won't be the producer price index that moves the market higher. Maybe it's the bank earnings. Maybe it's JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and BlackRock. Have those earnings before the market opens. Just noticed, as I continue to talk about, that oftentimes with the inflation data, you'll get one up day followed by a down day, or a down day followed by an up day. Now, the CPI data caused the market to gap lower. The futures so off in this gap from the previous day. Diversions on these intraday charts, but again, these divergences, sometimes they produce reversals, other times, again, just short-term price fluctuations. Divergences on the weekly and monthly charts and daily charts that really cause the long-term trends and shorter-term trends and swing moves and so forth. But here we gapped lower, we went back up, we filled the gap on the 5-minute chart, and then we came down to the 200-period moving average and bounced off of it. The 50 kind of going sideways there, and we rebounded towards the end of the session there, getting back above the 50 and bouncing off the 200. We drop below the 200, there's risk of a bigger sell-off, bouncing off of it. We could still resume the advance. Again, I personally believe that NASDAQ will fill the gap. It's within striking distance now, and very good chance you could do it tomorrow or on into early next week. NASDAQ does that, which it could be tomorrow. S&P very well could be peaking. Now, NASDAQ could fill the gap. Just bring it up because we're within striking distance. And NASDAQ, well, S&P was down just over 0.2%, down about 12 points. It's doji. NASDAQ was still down, but not as much. It was down 0.13%. S&P was down 0.21%. So NASDAQ, now the 60-minute charts, again, you can see a divergence develop right here in the most recent price action. I still think S&P is going higher because I think NASDAQ will fill that gap or directly below that gap fill on NASDAQ. 13 countdown sell signal today. Again, we talked about the triangle. I told you I thought we'd be able to break out and move to a new fresh high. We did. Again, continue. Warn you. I think the top will develop. I continue to talk about that. I believe that we're going to continue to rally. I think that rally's almost done. Still think we go higher. Target level's been between 5,750 and 6,000 based on the monthly trend lines and the weekly upper channel line, that range as well. I told you over here about the peak diverging with the S&P. I told you we get a sell-up, but then again, I told you S&P or NASDAQ's going to, we diverge with NASDAQ, I should say. We are going to see NASDAQ fill that gap, and S&P would eventually move to new highs. It has now done so, forming a what? A larger topping process. So while I continue to talk about a rally and new highs on the S&P as the NASDAQ goes back to fill the gap, I think that's coming to a conclusion here. And again, we could see that wrap up similar amount of time. This week, next week, seen it in the past, 2001, 2007, that I've talked about at great length and detail when we got the first rate cut with the Fed. It may be a little bit longer. My guess is we're going to see something probably very similar based on the divergences that we're looking at in the weekly time frame. But don't be surprised if we go a little bit longer. Certainly possible. I've talked about this at great length and detail. Using it as a guideline, not trying to read a crystal ball. It will peak on this day at this time. Not what we're using it for. So I hope you hear what I'm saying. The MACD is rolling over. Again, we'll see what happens. There's always a possibility of a back test, and then this continuing on into next week. We still rally with the PPI data or with earnings. Here's a trend line I'm watching. I'm watching the trend line up here in the weekly time frame right here, including the shadow, excluding the shadow. I think we're going to reach this level. Maybe we overthrow it like NASDAQ did. You can see the divergences on here as well as I can. They're going to play out. We're likely going to break this 5-week winning streak here. Chance we do it next week. That divergence is forming in the daily time frame right now that could complete by Friday or on into early next week. Certainly possible. Watching this trend line right here, I'm watching the upper boundary. Talked about these divergences again with momentum, and you can see these triple divergences developing. Again, they may not be done. Again, we may include the shadow here, but I think that it's coming to a conclusion, as I said, and you will see these divergences play out in the not too distant future. In a very similar timeline that we've seen 2001 and 2007, maybe it goes a little bit longer. We got the same divergences going on here with the Dow at the RSI. The MACD has this divergence down here. Long-term 125-year trend line at this area, or just a little bit higher, again, including or excluding the shadow. Still some wiggle room there, right there, if we go a little bit higher. Here we're overthrowing this trend line right here. Maybe the S&P does that. NASDAQ did it. What happens? Divergences are going to play out here on the Dow. Divergences in the daily time frame, and again, got that topping tail previously. We might overthrow that. You still have rising wedge, or we can even exclude the shadow right here, and again, come up here a little bit higher. Maybe overthrow the trend line, but still a little bit of a tighter trend line if we exclude that shadow on the Dow. Just some things to be paying attention to. These divergences all over the place. And again, the MACD still might form one right here in the most recent price action. If we do get a bigger rally on the Dow with JP Morgan or some of their catalysts. Talking about the boundary here on the weekly chart of this channel and the daily time frame, and we've got this upper boundary right here. And again, maybe we overthrow it. We'll see what happens. We've got a doji today. It is a bearish Harami cross, an inside day, if you will, with a doji. That could either give us a reversal or it could give us a bigger back test, and then we go higher. So again, like I said, it could drag on, could longer than the guideline that I've been talking about. It's just a guideline. That's all it is. Could be something like that. But again, I talked about the triangle, talked about this support level. We start coming back down. We start breaking this trend line. We start breaking this horizontal support level, then that's going to be extremely bearish. Here, candlestick pattern doesn't play out. I always say candlesticks have to be confirmed and get a follow through. The patterns, otherwise, are meaningless. If we have it be a continuation doji, then we'll be watching the upper boundary here. Again, candle patterns form all the time. On the Fed day, we got a topping tail and a shooting star, but it never got confirmed. It got canceled out. It got negated the very next day. Candlesticks are meaningless unless the patterns are get confirmation and a follow through. You can see the divergence is developing here as well as I can. Again, maybe RSI ends up moving to a new extreme rather than a divergence. Possible, but maybe we just come up here, get a topping tail or something like that, or tap this level and then reverse off of it. We'll be watching, but you can see the rising wedge, the S&P 500. I think that this trend line is very important here. I think the trend lines I've talked to you about in the weekly and the monthly time frames, very, very important here. And again, we're likely going to see a top here. Why? Because resistance in the long-term monthly time frame going all the way back to 1929 at the 5750 to 6,000 area. Make it to 6,000, but we, again, move to the 5,800 area tomorrow, or maybe on into the 5,900 area if we go a couple of days. We'll be watching, but I think this is likely coming to a conclusion. Very well could be when these divergences begin to play out that they spill over into the weekly time frame, when we start seeing those weekly time frame divergences begin to play out, and then the monthly ones starting a larger reversal. 100 down 0.13% down, about 27 points today. But again, we didn't fill the gap. We came within striking distance. I believe we'll fill the gap. We may stay there for a little bit, overthrow it, tag it, and reverse immediately. It can play out a number of different ways. High today was 20,314. Again, ever since we had the sell-off with this gap back over here, I told you we were going to go down, but eventually come back and fill. We had a bunch of gaps. I told you eventually we'd come back and fill the gaps. I told you I believe we have an ABC structure on our hands. Month, ahead of the inflation data. We sold off with the jobs report. I told you that we'd likely bottom the following week. A reversal with the inflation data we did. We got a bullish inside day right there. And again, we got the confirmation of the bullish inside day with the CPI data 2 sessions later right there. And we even rallied with the PPI data right there and ended up getting back above our 50-period moving average here on NASDAQ. Now, I think a divergence is developing on a lot of indicators for NASDAQ. I thought we topped back over here on July 10th. I told you that on July 11th. I told you leading up into that, surrounding the Independence Day holiday, that I thought we were about to top at the trend lines I talked about, the weekly time frame. We did. We overthrew them a little bit. Hit that upper Bollinger Band, and then we reversed. And that was also, I told you we could sell off with the CPI. Well, we did right there. But the next day with the PPI, we actually had a rally, and we ended up getting a counter trend for a couple of days. So again, I told you, times inflation reports, the day is up, the other is down, or sometimes down like we got today, followed by up. You know, it doesn't always play out that way. Over here we had 2 up days, but again, it's just something I've noticed. Sometimes one report go up, the other report you go down. With that inflation data when it's back to back. I think a divergence is developing here. I don't think we're done. I think we go higher. Now again, I want to make it clear. I believe the top is here. I told you that at the time. I continue to tell you that. I could be wrong about that. If I am, we go up and we hit the upper channel line in the monthly and the weekly time frame, which is again up at this area again. Just move just slightly above this area, but my guess is that we're not going to do that. My guess is we're going to get a lower high and diverge with the S&P500, probably the Dow. I think the Dow makes new highs with the bank earnings tomorrow. As we're rallying back up to try to fill the gap, and we're just, again, striking distance of doing it. We hit, again, what did I say, 20,314. The gap fills at 20,398, so we'll probably reach it tomorrow, if not next week, but I think you've got a good shot that we're going to do it this week. I told you I thought we would reach it in all likelihood this week. With the CPI, probably tomorrow with the bank earnings or maybe the PPI. As we're rallying up here, NASDAQ is getting a 13 countdown sell signal as we're doing this. Recall that I talked about the 9 count leading up to the 9 count as we got this peak right here, and I told you that 9 count was forming as we are going up and slamming up into resistance in the weekly time frame and forming this rising wedge you see right here in the daily time frame. A 13 count down sell signal forming, and it's showing price exhaustion again. And I think that this divergence will complete here next few days. Maybe it completes tomorrow, maybe on into early next week. I think it's going to complete. When that happens, we'll see a reverse. We have a divergence. We did move today to a new recent minor high. Again, 20,000, what I say, 314. Peak over here is 20,273, the black candlestick. We didn't fill the gap at that time. I told you that I still thought we would. I still think we are going to right now. I think we're still going to push higher. Divergence is in place. We already do have a new high right here. And again, I think one is developing here on the RSI and the MACD down here. I think that is likely going to complete over the next 3 sessions. Maybe it completes by tomorrow on Friday's session. Maybe it completes by early next week, but I think it's going to complete here and start a reversal. We may get a spike high, topping tail, start seeing a reversal. We may get a big rally with the banks or with the PPI or something tomorrow. NVIDIA rallies up big and pulls back up with it. However it may unfold, whatever the catalyst that brings it higher. I think this is where we come. We fill the gap here. And then we'll see. Do we hang out there for a little while, a couple days, and turn? Do we, jump up there, get a close above it, reverse? Do we get an intraday push above it, reverse? We get a topping tail. Do we get some kind of candlestick reversal pattern? These are the things that I'm going to be watching. Now, again, we don't have to form a divergence on every indicator. We may not on the RSI. We just may turn up and move to a new extreme on the RSI. Over here, we had no bullish divergence down here. We had a new extreme, and that marked the bottom. So again, we're watching to see how it unfolds. As we're forming this divergence on the MACD and possibly here on the RSI, and again, about to fill this gap, I think it'll probably happen tomorrow. A 13 countdown sell signal on the daily chart because we closed above the bar from 2 bars ago on an intraday basis. I've shown you the daily chart on NASDAQ. I've shown you the 13 count again quickly. I think that we're going to fill this gap up here. I talked about the bull flag over here. I talked about the bottom. Talked about the divergences here, down over here, up here. Still may see a divergence develop here. We do have a larger one that is forming. We're above this peak right now. So again, if we don't move to new high, you do have a divergence there. You might form one, a new fresh one, or just form one right here in the most recent price action, and that may be it. We may stay here for a little while. We may stay here. It's a brief moment. We don't know. And then again, a larger divergence right here in the MACD. Could be under construction. We'll be watching to see if we fill the gap tomorrow. My guess is we're probably going to. If we don't, then on into early next week. But again, I think this is coming to a conclusion here. I've been warning you about this 13 countdown sell signal that is setting up. It completed today. But you listen to me very carefully. I mean, that's it. It's over. Here we go. We're going to collapse. Count warns us of price exhaustion, up or down. See, some of these other 9 counts have marked turning points and reversals. They've done a very good job. I used this one to help me call the top on the NASDAQ over here. If I end up being proven correct, which I think I will be, showing you what could happen if I'm not correct about that, that again, we just go right back up to resistance slightly above this high. 13 countdown sell signal. I warned you this is coming. Keep going, and we try to move to a new high. We still have a 4 of a 9 count here, and you can get a 13, 9, and you can get a double sequence count sell signal, a 13 followed by a 9. That's possible. Yes, so is that we're going to diverge with the S&P 500. I think we're going to fill this gap, and then I think you're going to see a reversal begin to happen. Maybe that takes a couple of days that we hang around this area. Maybe we just are there, a topping tail. We get a close above the level there, gap fill, and we start to reverse immediately. A lot of people are watching this gap. Institutions are watching this gap. Traders are watching this gap. Traders play gaps all the time. But NVIDIA completed a 13 count today as well in the daily time frame. Now again, I told you I thought we peaked over here in June. Let me try to get that a little bit straighter there. We tried to peak over here in June 20th. I think that peak is probably going to hold. Again, the same thing with the S&P. I think we're forming a double, or NASDAQ, we're forming a double top. If I'm wrong about that, we go to a new high, and then we get a double top up here in all likelihood. Same is true here for NVIDIA with the 13 count. We have another 9 count in play, which is a 6 of a 9 right here, the bar 6. That still may play out if we try to move to a new high, so do keep that in mind. I could be wrong about the peak over here, but I'm just telling you what I think. It was up 1.63%. I told you I thought we'd break this trend line right here on the NVIDIA daily chart. We did. Told you I thought that we would move above the August high right here, and we did that earlier in the week. So here we are. I think we get a lower high. I'm wrong. Interesting if NVIDIA moved to a new high, but NASDAQ did not. Back over here, NVIDIA, NASDAQ made a higher high in July. NVIDIA did not. It made a lower high. Do they diverge again if I'm wrong about a lower high here? But we'll be watching to see how it unfolds. Continue to quickly point out, again, as we're getting the divergences in the weekly time frame, we have these 9 count sell signals that are developing in the weekly time frame here on the S&P and on the Dow. NASDAQ got the 9 count back over at this peak when it had peaked. S&P went higher for 2 weeks. NASDAQ peaked the week right after. Again, we can get the 9 count. We can go a little bit higher next week or 2. We don't follow the guideline that we had in 2001 and 2007. We could see a turn immediately. Heat up in the Middle East, oil shock or something happen. Facilities are the target. See, markets have a very negative reaction to that very quickly. Watching to see how it unfolds, but just keep in mind, as we're rallying up, we're getting this 9 count. We'll be watching what kind of candlestick. We have this winning streak, a 5-week winning streak here. It's likely going to be broken next week. Maybe we get one more week out of it, and then we turn. Odds are starting to favor that we're going to get a down week at some point. My guess is we're going to get a reversal based on the divergences that I'm seeing in the weekly time frame on the S&P and on the Dow. Over here we had the 13 count. It gave us the pullback, got the trend extension, and we got a 13-9 reversal pattern, went a little bit higher, and then got the sell-off, bigger than this one. This one right here is likely, now we have a 9-9 reversal pattern, likely going to produce a reversal here in the weekly time frame, especially with those divergences hovering over the S&P 500. The perfected sell signal, we did move, as I predicted, above bar 7. My guess is we're going to continue higher and go a little higher. I think we're going to top out, and it very well could be that we do it this week. On into next week, certainly possible. If we can rally with the banks that can help the Dow, JP Morgan earnings tomorrow, they're a Dow component. Could that kick the Dow? It's not a perfected signal yet, but here in the weekly time frame, but could that kick us above bar 7? I think you got a pretty good shot at that. If we don't do it with the Dow, with the JP Morgan earnings, possibility that we perfect the signal next week. But I think